Ellers. He's the Chief Digital, the Zoom lady always gets me. He is the Chief Digital Officer at DPA in Germany, and he's joining us to talk about mass personalization of content. Meinolf has coordinated DPA's digital transformation ever since 1996, which is right at the very beginning of the internet and its relationship with publishing. So that's tremendously exciting. And that's when he became team leader for DPA Online, one of the first multimedia newswires in the world. He co-founded DPA Infocom, the agency's digital subdivision, and Minds International, which is a global innovation network of news agencies. He recently initiated the Use the News project to improve news literacy in young audiences, and Drive, which is a cooperation of almost 20 publishers that aims to grow digital reader revenue based on shared data analytics and AI. So tremendously interesting range of projects there, Meinolf. I'll hand over straight to you if you're happy to share your screen. We'll get into it.
Thanks, Corinne. I will do that. So yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me this morning. And I will be happy to share a couple of insights from the Drive project. So Drive is one of the first data sharing projects between media companies worldwide. In the case of Drive, we started in 2020, and we are now more than 20 independent publishers who are sharing the data collection, data analytics, the organizers of Drive are DPA, the National News Agency of Germany, my company, and Schickler Consultants. It's the largest consultancy firm for media in Germany. And here you see the publishers involved, and we were pretty happy that we were awarded with the INMA Global Media Award last year as the best in show. So what's behind Drive? The basic motivation to start this initiative was that we all felt that we are lagging behind in building significant digital revenue. Here in Europe, the Scandinavian publishers like Schibsted and Bonnier and A-Media, they were first in basically saying, get rid of digital advertising strategies because they are only good for the platforms. We are not generating the revenue we need to monetize and refinance our newsrooms. So they made a big strategic shift to rediscover reader revenue, build the paywalls, and start to convert people into digital subscriptions. And we are following exactly the same path. So how does it work technically? You see in the middle is Drive, the infrastructure that is provided by DPA and Schickler. And on the left side, you see the publisher side. And we are integrating an open source tracking tool on the websites of all these publishers. We are monitoring usage data. So whenever a user is clicking a story, we generate an event, and this event is ingested into our data pool. And we do the same with the content that is clicked, so that we basically have the events, the event data, and the content data, and the subscription data. It's all taken into the data pool, the data warehouse. We currently have, after 2 years, more than 8 billion data points in the data warehouse. And this, of course, is a fantastic basis to train algorithms in order to analyze this data. And we do this, we apply algorithms centrally. We have a team of 8 engineers and data scientists at Schickler. And the result is that we provide all these publishers with dashboards and results. The important thing here, this is completely transparent to everyone. So you can benchmark yourself to all the other 20 publishers. For those of you who are more on the technical side, this is how it works. There you see in the top Snowplow, this is the tracking tool. And you see that we use BigQuery to do the analytics. And then on the right side in the top, we produce all these dashboards, more than 120 different dashboards currently. The one thing is technology and data expertise, but it won't work. It won't produce any results if you don't get into the heart of the newsroom. And this is, I would say, basically the secret sauce of Drive so far, that we regard ourselves to be a translator and a transmission tool between data and data analytics on the one side and the operative reality of editors in the newsroom. So you see principle one on the left side, we are very much working on data-based experimentation. We are now a community of almost 150 people from all these publishers that meet along so-called tracks. We have a newsroom track, that's the most important, meeting once a week virtually. We have a data track of data analysts. We have a sales track of the people who are in charge of marketing, sales, subscription, audience development. And these teams, they define a hypothesis that we test in experiments, in A/B testing. And from week to week, we come up with new experiments and results. And here on the right side, you can see how it's organized with these tracks. And from experiment to experiment, we form little groups, little teams that concentrate on one single experiment, and then we move on and start the next one. So yeah, what does it lead to? It helps us to produce better content. It helps to optimize the playout, and it helps to support the salespeople in converting a better usage, more loyalty on the user side into subscriptions. What helped us dramatically in training, educating the editors, you know, I very much believe in Peter Drucker's quote, culture is eating strategy for breakfast. This is so right when we talk about digital transformation of newsrooms. If you don't win the cultural change, if you don't get into the minds of the editors that they embrace data-informed publishing as the new driver of their work, you will fail. And so what helped us a lot here was the definition of our key metric, which is called media time. So we are measuring the time that a certain individual is spending on the information sites, on certain articles. And on the other side, we are measuring the media time a certain piece of content is generating. And that's a very easy metric, easy to understand. We first thought about using conversions as the key metric, but conversions, how to translate usage into subscriptions is very far away from the daily work and the thinking of editors. So here you see we could prove that media time can directly translate it into conversion and in retention. So the key metrics for the salespeople. So our basic thesis, and this is proven, the higher the media time, the higher the proximity that a possibility that people can be converted into subscriptions. And if they are subscribers, the higher the media time they spend on our sites, the less likely it is that they are going to churn. So I will skip this. You see, these are examples for all the dashboards we have. As I said, the fantastic thing is you can benchmark yourself against all of the others, a single other one. This is very important because if you are lagging behind in certain aspects, you will see who is leading the group there, and you can copy, you can learn from the others who are doing better. So we do experiments, as I said. This is one example, for instance. We made very good experiences with regional articles that sum up the events of the day in a certain region. And there was one publisher who worked with this format and generated very good results, very high media time. And so all the others started step by step to introduce the same format with the same results. These typical A/B testings, is it better to present a lead paragraph or just use the headlines? We can directly compare which format is doing better, and everyone is sharing the learnings and can use it to optimize his performance. So this is a very relevant insight we generated. This graph, and we developed it in cooperation with our friends from Schibsted in Norway. It basically says in the horizontal bar, you see the media time an article or a topic is generating, and on the vertical bar, it's the conversions that are generated with these contents. And what we found out is that there is something like an 80-20 rule. And this graph isn't showing it very well. There is a more dramatic one. I don't know whether I have it in the presentation here, but it says that basically only 20% of what we produce is driving traffic or is generating media time by 80%. On the other side, when you turn it around, it means that 80% of what we produce is only attracting minimal usage, and we basically fail to reach our goals with most of the stories we produce. So this mismatch is a big headache. And why is it so? We believe that has a lot to do with our print DNA. Newsrooms are still very much driven by filling the pages and by daily agenda setting, so agenda journalism, and both is not helping to meet our digital goals. So the Schibsted people, for instance, they say after almost being more than 5 years in data-informed publishing, for a regional paper, it's 2 or 3 stories that will make the play per day. And they recommend to really focus on these stories and put them in the center of all efforts, right? So this is the graph I was talking about. Here you see how dramatic the situation is, in fact. And so a very limited number of stories that make it to the upper right quadrant, and the majority is stuck in the upper left. And this means these stories neither gain media time nor conversions. And this is frustrating for newsrooms. We have to turn this around. How can we achieve that? And now I'm talking for the rest of my presentation briefly about personalization. What we feel when we talk about personalization is, and there is a lot of data that proves that, young people used to the user experience of Netflix and Spotify and YouTube and Amazon, they are now used to complete personalization. And then we come along and our products are one size fits all. And this is, of course, due to the limitations of print and the print age, but the younger audiences no longer accept that. If you are no sports fan at all, why should you pay? I mean, in Germany, monthly subscription for the full package, including print, is now almost 50 euros. Could you convince people to pay if, let's say, you have to pay for a full sports section if you are not interested in sports, right? This wouldn't happen at Spotify or Netflix. You don't have to pay for things you don't use. So we have to change our portfolios so to enable step-by-step personalized user experiences. We are currently training algorithms to support us in achieving personalization. And this is only possible if we understand the user and the user's preferences. And this has very much to do with neuroscience. We have to understand motivations. People are not the same. People are different. They have different interests. They have different preferences when it comes to stories based on their personal situation, based on interest whatsoever. And this, what you see here, is the user need model developed by the BBC. And this is only one model, but a very simple one and easy to understand for newsrooms. And you can find the same at the Wall Street Journal and many others who are now starting to separate their stories by user needs. And behind user needs, you have motivations that are different, that can be, there is a system in Germany, for instance, called limbic, and they define so-called limbic types. So people who are more driven by being performative, or people who are more so-called harmonizers, who are very much family-oriented, and you can measure their different user behavior and their different preferences by consuming news and information. So we are going to personalize the paywalls. We are personalizing the stories we play out, and we are just starting to personalize. Let's say there will be these 2 or 3 stories of the day that will be the same for everyone, because they are what we say is signature content. It's what defines the editorial brand. But on top, we will offer a small number of stories based on recommendations and on your personal interest and what we find out, what the algorithms learn about your usage behavior, so that we can meet your personal preferences. Yeah, so and this is how we work. I guess I showed it in the beginning. Many people worldwide ask us, why was it possible to cooperate? And it has a lot to do with trust. The DPA is the National News Cooperative of Germany, and all these publishers are our shareholders, and that enables us and helps us to start initiatives in order to help the publishing industries. And we are accepted as the honest moderator and the neutral institution. And the same is true for the Schickler consultancy. They have worked for all these publishers. So I would say we are all members of the circle of trust here, and this is very, very relevant. Yeah, I guess that's just a glimpse. I guess WAN-IFRA will share these slides with you later. And of course, I'm happy to ask your questions. And if you have any questions after the session, don't hesitate to contact me.
Gosh, where to start? So much. Meinolf, thank you so much. There were a couple of questions. One is, what is the full name of Drive? And I'm going to add to that, is it available to publishers outside of Germany? So let's start with that.
Drive stands for Digital Revenue Initiative, which means that we won't limit ourselves here to reader revenue. Now that we have the infrastructure in place, we are thinking about new personalized advertising formats that we can enable with this infrastructure.
And is it something
And of course,
that,
sorry,
yeah.
Corinne, it's basically available for partners outside Germany. But what we recommend is to build regional clusters. So we are discussing with players in South America, we are discussing with partners in the US. So it makes sense to build an infrastructure that would then address more than one publisher.
Yes, of course. I think that's that's sort of the nature of it, isn't it? And you'd mentioned that it's that some elements of this are open source, which would be good to understand as well.
Right. And I guess this is a very good example of the new digital world in a way, that you can click together a couple of open source tools. The data pool is hosted in the Google Cloud, but in Europe, that's very important. And but the secret sauce, as I said, is human intelligence. It's about the algorithms that we apply, and especially the community effect, that we form a group that is exchanging, communicating, and learning from each other, so that we flatten the learning curve to accelerate the process of improving the performance.
Let's talk a bit about the collaborative nature of the Drive project, if we can. So first of all, competition is part of the journalism culture. It's very difficult to get newsrooms to collaborate. How have you, let's come on to the third party role that you have in a moment, but let's talk about the sort of culture of building that trust and building those relationships. How have you helped publishers get more comfortable with the idea of working together?
I guess it has a lot to do with a sense of urgency here. I guess 5 or 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. But German publishers, like publishers in most countries, are really confronted with very existential questions. And we feel that time is running out. My generation is the last that is really using print subscriptions. And then you see in all the internal spreadsheets that the number of subscribers is dramatically going down. So we have really, the time is running out. And I guess this is the sense, the mindset that people were open to say, well, we are too slow if we go it for our own. So it makes sense really to team up and accelerate.
Just on the nature of the survival of print, we did hear yesterday that there is still quite a mixed media consumption model in India. So, you know, around half of media consumers will get some of their media from, some of their news from digital, but they'll also be more inclined to buy a newspaper. And I know I've had conversations with publishers in India about this to say, well, maybe it won't go the way that it has. You know, let's say, for example, in Europe or in the Anglophone world, it hasn't sort of, we don't expect that to happen here. What is your crystal ball on that one?
I can only say for the Western countries, but here the thing is pretty clear. There is no future for the daily newspaper in the region, no future. This year, we will be additionally confronted with a high rise in paper prices, dramatically, up to 60–70%. Okay. And we have a minimum wage now in Germany that affects the paper boys. And these are additional cost factors that make print production so inefficient. So the consequence will be that the daily production will be phased out over the next 2 to 5 years. And we are experimenting instead with a printed weekend edition that is far bigger and more attractive than it used to be, and combine subscription packages between digital and a printed edition for the weekend.
Okay. Before I come on to the other questions I had, we do have another one in the chat, which is, do you have any idea on how to engage print readers with your tools? There was a discussion here in Europe and in Germany about the future of e-paper. And we see in the data that e-paper is a very strong bridge technology. We now see people, since the subscription prices for print are so high now, almost 50 euros per month, and now you see due to the Russian war in Ukraine, the subscription,
the energy prices are going up. So for families, it's now really about recalculating their household budgets. And 50 euros per month for a print subscription for the regional paper is really something. So we see people moving from print to e-paper because they are used to the product and the navigation. But this is also something that helps to convert young people who don't like the fast rhythm of the website and the mobile pages. So, and we see that e-paper has a lot of digital innovation potential that hasn't been activated yet. So we believe we have to strengthen the e-paper so that we have a good bridge between paper and all the digital formats, and that might help to convert people even more.
Okay, now we've got a couple of questions around, yeah, we'll come on to that one in a moment. I wanted to ask you, first of all, about continuing the theme of collaboration. DPA is able to drive this because it is this honest third broker. In the UK, there's an organisation called Bureau Local, which is bringing together local publishers in that same sort of role. What if there isn't an external organisation to drive those relationships? Can it happen organically?
If it's not there, build it.
Yeah.
So which means you can have an outside consultancy, or what I wouldn't do is sometimes we see that, let's say, the market leader in a certain country is offering his services to the small and medium-sized ones. That's very often not the best basis for trust. So I would say make it an organization that is treating every member even. In our case, of course, publishers need to pay for Drive. It's a significant monthly fee, but it's the same for the large ones and the small ones. And in the beginning, the small ones argued, yeah, well, we are so small, there has to be a factor so that we pay less. No, they didn't need to engage and hire data analysts because Drive is providing all they need. The large ones have still their own analytics infrastructure, and they are contributing additional insight to Drive. So they are contributing while the small ones are only taking. And that's the reason why we say we treat everyone the same. We don't care whether you have a circulation of 10,000 or 500,000.
That's very interesting. Now, there is a question here around personalization. So we might start on that and then come back to how you do your experiments in a moment. So one person here has said, we tried a few personalization SaaS tools, so international popular ones, but none has given us satisfying results, unfortunately, not even compared with personalization algorithm in YouTube or Netflix. Any tips on what we should do? We don't really have capable developers who could code something like that.
I can only repeat what Peter Drucker said. Culture eats strategy, and I would add technology for breakfast. You can have the smartest tools in the world. In the end, it's about the culture in the newsroom. Personalization has to be embraced by the newsroom. And this is why we work with these concepts of user needs, motivations. This is nothing that the algorithms and data analytics can do for you. These are the technology and the analytics and the algorithms are assistants. But the editors, the salespeople, audience development, they have to understand what is driving my people, which are the relevant and important user groups, which are those I can neglect. You have to prioritize. And these are the concepts that are driving the process. I guess, and that's another reason why it's so good to cooperate, because you need many, many insights, many, many different approaches, and then you can compare, and it's a permanent A/B testing among people, right? One is going this way, the other that way, then we can compare the results and say, hey, direction A was far better, so let's all switch to A and let's skip B, right? This is nothing that you can do with smart tools. I don't believe in those who say, yeah, we buy in and license all these fantastic tools and then it works. No, it won't work.
So, okay, couple of questions around this then. How can we better match editorial production and individual user preferences. So let's start with that one.
Yeah, apply these concepts. User needs, the BBC concept is now very familiar. I can recommend to you, there was a white paper by a startup called Smart Octo. And this white paper was written by Dimitri Shishkin, who developed the user needs at the BBC, and he's now a consultant. And we are working with Dimitri as well. So that is a very good white paper that gives you a fantastic overview what is possible here. And the other thing is motivation. As I said, this limbic types is a fantastic concept that you can apply. And it all comes down that I mean, this is a big cultural shift for newspapers, right? We used to be one size fits all. We said, this is what we feel is important. And we filled the pages, we produced that, and everyone was accepting it because in the print age, we used to be a so-called need product. You weren't able to lead a good local life without knowing the news from the local newspaper. There was no alternative. Now in the digital age, we have changed from a need product to a want product. If you are a want product, you have to really fight for people's attention. You have to fight to stay on their relevant set. And this is far more difficult. It requires permanent engagement. And therefore, the thing to start is learn about your user, learn what's going on in their brains, learn about their motivations, and then you can separate and start to prioritize. This group is low-hanging fruit. They like what we are doing. And this is a group we can completely ignore. They will never use and accept our products. And this is a complete new culture for the newsroom, but I guess we have to get there step by step.
Okay, I want one more question from the audience about personalization, and then I want to go on a little bit about the methodologies that you're using. So have you had any experience with different tones for the same story and which works better to increase the media time of the reader?
That's a fantastic question and a very important aspect. We invited a scientist for one of the next calls of the Drive community, and she is an expert on neuroscience and journalism. And her findings say we need to offer more constructive journalism stories. You know, constructive journalism, big trend here in Europe, and the basic idea behind it is if you give stories a certain positive spin, if hope is involved, it will immediately get more acceptance than if you raise panic or you drive it in a negative way, right? And you can imagine these days, we just thought we have passed COVID, and now there is this war going on. So people are in a permanent state of being alarmed, and this is not good for news and information. We see new phenomenon like news avoidance, news fatigue, and yes, I guess we have to experiment with a more positive tonality. Not lying, right? It's not about alternative facts. No, it's just about to say, what is the spin of the story? And the positive spin, that I guess that's for sure, without changing the facts, the positive spin will help to attract people and not send them away and frighten them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so now for the experiment process, the research process, understanding information about readers and consumers, it sounds a bit like decision by committee. So I'm curious what the decision-making process is. How do multiple publishers decide what to study and make sure that they get the metrics that they need?
Okay. No, it's a permanent dialogue. It's a ping pong. I mean, on the top level, we have a steering committee with people from the C-level, CEOs, chief editors. Each publisher sends one person, but they are only talking about the strategy, the pricing topic, for instance. Or we had a veto rule in the beginning, so you could raise your veto and prevent a certain publisher to join Drive because he was a competitor. And we changed that. There is no veto anymore. Now we can blend out the data of your competitor, and you can see all the others, but only not this one. So this is done by the steering committee. And then we have, as I mentioned, these track teams. And the newsroom team is the most relevant. And and we have different ways to bring in ideas or proposals. So one thing is that the data analysts, if they have a certain finding, they will present it and they will bring it with a question and say, hey, all you guys in the newsroom track, should we go deeper into that? Or should we experiment A versus B? And then people decide if there is, I wouldn't say a majority, if 2 or 3 publishers raise their hand and say, yes, we are in and we join this experiment team, we will start it. We won't do it if there's only one. So that's the way how it works. It's a permanent team and group communication process. And we have started recently to motivate publishers to share a so-called drive moment in each of these weekly newsroom sessions. So whenever you were surprised by something, you had high expectations for a certain story and it completely failed, no media time generated, or other way around, you had a completely unexpected success. It's presented, and maybe then the data analysts take this experience and try to find the data for that. Can we find an explanation why this happened? And if we find an explanation, we can make it a recommendation for everyone, right? So this is the.
Oh, sorry. No,
sorry,
so this is no. So this is, finish your sentence. Sorry.
So this is a fantastic thing in cooperation that, I mean, if you involve people in your organization and you try to implement a data-informed publishing, it's not only that the number of people is limited, but you are part of the, how should I say, the power play in your organization. So there is person A, and person A always has good ideas, but is not accepted, right? And then there is the chief editor, and if the chief editor says, I don't believe it, half of the people will say, oh, the chief editor said he doesn't believe it, so I shouldn't have a different opinion. And here, all opinions are on the table, because this aspect, what does it mean to the hierarchy and my position, is completely regarded. It's unimportant, doesn't play a role.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. So this next question is a yes/no question. If publishers were interested in reaching out to you, let's say on Twitter, so that you've got it more than one, would DPA be able to give them a hand?
Of course.
Fantastic. And the last question, which I have 1 minute and 53 seconds for, I mean, you guys have been doing this for a really long time, and you mentioned Schibsted, who've also been concentrating on digital revenue for a long time. Now, let's say you're just starting to get started this year on the hard yards. What would you, if you were a manager, need to have ticked off by the end of 2022, in your view? Let's say on personalization, let's narrow it down to that.
Before you start into personalization, have a good analysis about your audience and really try to get a good definition, separation of the different target groups, and then take something like user needs and have a good user need strategy to say, this is user need number 1 for me, this is number 2, and this is how I will serve these user needs in daily production. That's why I would start. It starts with understanding the user. That's the first thing.
Fantastic. Meinolf, thank you so much. We've been in conversation with Meinolf Ellers, the Chief Digital Officer at DPA in Germany. He's very easy to find on Twitter, just so you know, Meinolf Ellers, easy. I've been your host. My name is Corinne Podger, and it's been so lovely to host this session for WAN-IFRA today. Folks, remember to join us. We're going to wrap up for the morning sessions now. You can rejoin us at 2:30 p.m. India time. And the sessions this afternoon will be about Google News Lab, and they will be sharing with us programs and training to support digital transformation of